As you see, we're starting a new series today. So we've been in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And I've been praying, actually for this, probably since, probably September or October, I started praying this year that, Lord, help me. I want us to have a very specific journey as we head towards Easter this year. And if you didn't know, Easter's soon. Did you know that? It's hard to believe. It's really hard to believe. And it's not that Easter's more important than any other time, but we know without Easter, why are we here? So I really wanted us to have this very specific journey to the cross. And I just prayed, and nothing was specific, and didn't really have any ideas until recently in reading in Luke and reading other Gospels. There kept being this statement that kept popping out to me. And we know that Jesus talked to a lot of people in his ministry. But one thing we notice is there'd be a moment where he'd talking to the crowd, it'd be large groups, and it would say this. It would say, and then he turned to. You know who he turned to? His disciples. And it stood out to me, and I kept noticing that phrase over and over and over. And it wasn't that his truths changed. It wasn't that what he said to them he couldn't have said. But there's a message you give to the close in your life and a message you give to those that aren't so close, right? And the disciples were in it from the beginning with him. Went through so much, and though they didn't quite understand what was about to happen, they understood more than others. And I kept thinking about how powerful these words are from a man who knew the minute he came to this earth that he was leaving this earth. He never didn't know the end. And how powerful your message would be when you know what's coming. And I was reminded of that yesterday. We were at a memorial service actually here. It was for a family member that I didn't know. I didn't have the honor to get to know this person, but it was on my father-in-law's side of the family. And they're talking about this man. And I don't know all the details to the story, but I know he got cancer, and he didn't last very long. It was very painful. It was very hard. And everybody kept telling, and he especially early on, he would post a lot on Facebook, just kind of sharing. He was well written, and he would just share his journey. And so people were using his own words. It was really powerful. But I kept thinking, with this message in mind, thinking how knowing what's about to come would very dramatically shift and change the words you used and the things you talked about and what was important to you. And there was one thing he said, and this isn't so much about him, but it was just this reminder of the power of the words that come when you know you might not be here much longer. And multiple people shared this story, but one person read it and so I went back and listened to it this morning. But in talking, and this was just weeks before he passed away, he's posting online and he said, I've never been someone to really have a bucket list. He said, but my bucket list is that I have a family member that is dear to me that doesn't know Jesus. And he said, I don't want to spend eternity without that person. And so he said, Lord, you know my heart, but I would ask that you shorten my days if that would allow them to come to know you, Lord. And that's powerful, right? But that kind of vision and that kind of clarity doesn't come easily. He can talk that direct and that powerful because he knows he's got days left on this earth. And I thought, if this man, he's just a man, yeah, he was a Christian, he's a follower of Christ, he's just a regular human like the rest of us. If his words were that powerful, knowing his end, how much more powerful would the words of Jesus been? How much more powerful would these words? He loves these men deeply. And when he turns to talk to them, he's giving them wisdom. He's giving them direction and guidance. Because what were they building up towards? His exit. And no, we're not the disciples, we're not apostles, but we are followers of Christ. And no, we're not waiting for his exit, but we're waiting for his return. And so I thought, what better way to prepare for Easter than to take the times he turned to his followers and gave them guidance direction, and wisdom. Because this wasn't just a man, this was our Savior. He knew what we didn't. And so this is my hope for this series, Conversations with Jesus, that we slow down and we take the time. And I could do this for weeks and weeks, but we're going to do 5 times where he turned and he spoke to the disciples. People who were desperate to be led. And today we're here desperate to be led. And so let's see what we can learn from the words of Jesus as he knew the cross was just months, weeks, days away. So today we're going to be in Luke 5, 1 through 11. And before we can kind of get into the times where he returned to them, we get to the first where he called them. And so I want us to look at the time where he called them. And if you would like, there are sheets in the back. And from the guidance of wise people in this room, I filled in the blanks for you because I was told that's too much work. So now you have, so this would just be a template for you, and you could take notes as you would like. But we're just going to walk through these verses, and don't let them overwhelm you, but we're going to walk through these verses and then say, okay, now what does this mean for us? So let's jump right in. So we'll be in Luke chapter 5, and let's look at 1 through 3. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Now let's look at what's happening here. So it's believed that chapter 5, verse 1 occurred the morning following the events of 42 through 43. All that's happening there is he is healing all through the night. And so we see that if that's the case, he's healed all night. He's retreated to a secluded place, and now he's found by the crowds and returned to minister to them. So he is constantly driven and focused in doing this work, and he comes right out of one to the next. And everywhere he goes, people want to see him. And so the crowds were so large that he actually got in the boat to teach. And I love this because he didn't say, hey, can I borrow your boat? He didn't say, hey, can I get in the boat? He just did it. Jesus doesn't need permission, does he? And I just find it interesting that he puts himself in Simon Peter's life. He doesn't wait for the invitation. He goes after him. He says, he could have chose anything. He could have just walked. We know he can walk on water. He didn't need a boat. So let's keep going. So then we go to verse 4 through 5, and it says, and when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And when Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. Now, those words here, he says, Jesus asked the men to return to the very place that they had labored all night in vain. And you may go, well, of course, he may not want it, but it was Jesus. Well, Jesus asked me to do some things that I didn't want to do. And I can imagine, because we know, what were they doing to those nets? Cleaning them. This is not a net that you would scoop fish out of your tank in your house. These nets are massive. They take multiple people, 2 boats to use. They are so wide, so huge, they're cleaning them. I know I'm not a very clean person, but I know in my home, when something's been cleaned and I go behind and put things on a clean surface, I get in trouble for it. And I can imagine they're going, but we just cleaned them, Lord. And let's be honest, what was Jesus' profession? Not fishermen. These were professional fishermen. And he says, hey, bring those nets back out here. And not only are they cleaning nets, they're cleaning empty nets. Think they were in a good mood? No. All night long, they had fished. And Jesus says, hey, come back to that thing you've already done and you thought you were finished, and let's try it again. Let's keep going. And see, as far as we can tell, at this point, Jesus is in the boat with them as he tells them to do this. And I find that interesting because Jesus doesn't send a note. Jesus doesn't say, hey, next time you think about it, go there and do it. He says, right here, right now, while I'm with you, let's do this together. As I read that, I thought, that we take for granted. That Jesus calls us to do some very hard things, but he never called us to do it alone. It's just this reminder demonstrating not only, yes, he calls us to be faithful. Yes, he calls us to do hard things, but he never calls us to do it alone. Now, the particular ancient Greek word Luke uses here for master is unique to Luke's gospel, meaning commander, leader, or even boss. And so it's referencing that word here is showing that even now that Peter doesn't quite understand who Jesus is, he knows there's something different, something special about him. And so Simon's statement, at your word I will let down the net, is one of faith in Jesus. It's showing this, we're going to watch this transition as Simon grows into his understanding of his need, who God is, and then what God has for him. And this is what's happening in this moment. And so we'll continue here. Now we go to verse 6 through 7. It says, and when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in other boats to come and help them. And they came and filled both the boats, so they began to sink. Now let's look here. It says Simon didn't make excuses. His faith in Jesus was well rewarded. He could have given every reason in the world why not to do this, right? We know. I've already been there. I don't want to get them back out. But he says, okay, Lord, if you said so, I'll try it. And Simon obeyed Jesus, not because the circumstances were right, not because it was easy, because he believed that Jesus was different. And this miracle is a reminder that when Jesus directs our works, it makes all the difference. They were just there. They had just done all this. These were gifted, talented fishermen on their own empty nets with Jesus, more than they could handle. We'll come back to that. Let's keep going. I find it interesting that these deep water nets, you know that Jesus could have said, hey, fish, hop in the boat. And every fish in that ocean could have jumped right in the boat. He chose to use what they had, what they knew, but also each other. See, those nets required to be together. Not one person could come out there and get all those fish. And as I was thinking about this, he didn't just call one disciple, he called 12 disciples. And sometimes we go, okay, my relationship with God, it's me and God. And I'm going to be devoted and connected and committed, but it's just me and God. But when we do our faith alone, it gets hard. We get defeated, and we're vulnerable. And Satan loves nothing more than a Christian who's all alone. A Christian that's sitting at home. Listen, there's nothing wrong with watching church on TV, but if all you have, the only believers you ever see are from a TV screen, they can't support you. They can't pick you up when you fall. They can't encourage you. They can't cry with you. They can't pray with you. They can't love you. And it's a reminder, we can't do this thing alone. So what does that mean? Well, to do life together, we have to be vulnerable. We have to admit our needs. He had to say, hey, I need help over here. Somebody get the net and come, because he couldn't do it alone. And I'm not going to stay here long, but I couldn't help but think sometimes, and I know in my own life, instead of raising my hand and saying, hey, I need some help over here, I just keep struggling, keep suffering. You know that net would have broke if he did it all by himself? He'd have got no fish. And I just wonder if there's any of you here today that needs to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help over here. People can't pray for you. People can't love on you. People can't encourage you. And no one wants to admit they need people. But if we'll all just do it together, if we'll all just go, wait, we all need people. The disciples needed people. Jesus didn't need anyone, and he still chose people. Well, let's keep going. We can go on the next one. Now, verse 8. But when Simon Peter saw all this, he fell down at Jesus' knee, saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. See, Jesus had already healed once. He healed in front of Peter. He healed his mother-in-law. But there's something different about this. It's not that he didn't think he was special. It's not that he didn't know Jesus had power, but there's something different about this. Why? Because this was personal. And here's what I love about Jesus, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's hard for me to grasp sometimes. But he will work and do things and move things, even if it's just for me. He loves us that specifically, that uniquely. And see, this miracle, it was not for the masses. It wasn't for the crowds. It was for these few men. And this is last week, she won't even like I'm bringing this up, but last week talking to my daughter, we prayed about a dress for her dance. And I said, we're grateful that the Lord answered this. And she said, we God healed Megan's sister, and God took care of Russell. And my thing, and I said, listen, I need you to understand. And we do this because I want you to know that God cares even about your thing. He cares about all things. And so when Jesus showed off for the few, it overwhelmed him. Jesus knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and where you need it. Now, just because it was personal and not public doesn't mean it was private. But he was willing to work to reveal himself to these men. And it's just this reminder of the personal, specific relationship we have with Jesus. Now, when he sees this, what happens is, not only is the power of Jesus revealed, but the weakness of Peter is also revealed. When you stand in the face of power, you feel very small, right? In the ocean, I feel tiny. If you're in big mountains or the Grand Canyon, you feel so small. And in this moment, he sees the creator of the universe, and he feels tiny, overwhelmed. And his response is very similar to others we see in Scripture. Isaiah and Peter's response, almost identical. Woe is me. Like, please, I don't even deserve to be in your presence. Let's see what continues to happen here. Verse 9 through 10. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. And this word here, the Greek, literally means stop being fearful. Stop being fearful. And he's reminding Simon that It's more about being in awe of God than it means afraid of what he'll do to you. And this, I was thinking about this and praying about this morning, and something jumped out to me. I just want to spend a minute to unpack it. Because as I thought about that, I thought that statement where he says, do not be afraid, is the difference between conviction and condemnation. See, Jesus convicts. Satan, he condemns. What's the difference? We've all felt bad about our choices, right? We've all felt no good, beat down, broken by the things. How could I do that? How could I say that? How could I? We've probably even been told by others, how could you call yourself a Christian and act like that? We've all been there. Am I wrong? We've all been there. How do I know it's Jesus and how do I know it's Satan? Because Jesus always follows up with, don't be afraid. Why? I've already taken your sin. I've already paid the price. He convicts, yeah. He'll break your heart over your sin. Being in the presence of God is humbling. I've told this story many times, but this summer when Jesus began to reveal things in my life that I was ashamed of, things that I just had begun to let my guard down, it started with, woe is me, please, Lord. I couldn't feel like I could breathe, but instantly, at the same time as he broke me, he picked me back up and said, hey, let's keep going. And the way I thought about this morning is, you want to know the difference between, is it Jesus or is it Satan? Conviction ends with a hug. And when Satan condemns, it ends in tears. So if you're sitting here today and you're beating yourself up, you're sitting here today feeling like a dirtbag, that ain't Jesus. Jesus doesn't call you out and say, hey, dirtbag. That's no longer your identity. He says, hey, beloved. Hey, the one that I've rescued. I love you. Don't be the person you used to be. That's not who you are. It hurts. It doesn't feel good, but you don't stay there. And that's what we're seeing here. He's saying, hey, don't be afraid. You don't need to be afraid, but you should be in awe. Let's keep going. And then he goes to this topic. He says, I'm going to now make you fishers of men. And this literally means to capture them alive, to capture people, to bring them in. And the idea is that you are going to bring them, take them, and set them free. The way I brought these fish in, you're going to go out and you're going to capture those who are lost, those who are confused, those who are in pain, those suffering. You're going to show them the mercy and grace and love that I've shown you. And see, there was never a greater fisher of men than Jesus, and he calls these 3, and then he calls 12, and then it just multiplies and multiplies until where we are today. Let's keep going. We're almost there, and then we'll bring it all to an end. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. See, this unprecedented success, this did not lead to a booming seafood business. They did not go, man, we have got it made. Now we'll just be the wealthiest fishermen in the world. No, see, what happened is they understood that that day with God, they could do anything. But on their own, they would be empty, like the nets. So they dropped their nets, and they followed him. They followed him. As it says on the next page, they followed him like the student following a rabbi, wanting to learn, wanting to be taught. And they didn't know what following him would consist of. They didn't know all that was ahead of them. But what they did know is that the unknown with Jesus was better than the known without him. And so as I began to think about and reflect on these verses, I couldn't get past the empty nets. I couldn't get past those big, huge nets. They're scrubbing and washing. And so I want us, just as we bring this to an end, because those nets revealed three things in their life, and let's look at them. See, because of the empty net, it revealed their need, it revealed his character, and it revealed their purpose. You think they get in the boat with Jesus if they caught fish that night? If those nets were even half full, you think they get them dirty again? You think they drag them? These things are huge. I don't think you understand. It would cover from all the way across the room. You think they would drag these out again? We can think highly of them. Would you do it? I wouldn't. But they didn't have anything in them. And this wasn't a leisurely fishing trip. This is their life. This is their job, their livelihood. You go in with no fish, you may not eat this week, month. Now, you may say, so if they were empty, they would go. If they were full, if they were even half full, they wouldn't go. So only having nothing made them need Jesus. Well, let me just help you understand what Jesus did. Because we hear that he filled these nets up, but I don't think we quite grasp it. So I did a lot of research trying to find, what does that mean for their life? If they got that many fish, and I want to be careful to say, I can't be positive these numbers I'm going to give are fully accurate, but because we weren't there. But I've read this book, I studied this book, and there was just all this math, and I'm not a math person. Some people are in this room. I don't do math, and it was too big. The numbers are too big for me. But when it boiled it all down, I just rolled down to it and said conclusion, and I looked for the conclusion. And it said the amount of fish based on the weight, the boat, the net, it would have been, if they would have sold it, it would have been 25 years worth of savings. You thought they just had a big meal. No, he provided for everything. Now, I don't know they took it with him. I don't know what happened with it. We don't know. All I know is he overwhelmed them. He didn't just do a lot. He did the impossible. So what does that mean? Well, even if they would have caught their normal capacity, he quadrupled it. So compared to their normal, they always needed him, right? But it wasn't until they were empty that they understood that need. And for us to follow, and for us to obey, and for us to be the people he called us to be, I got to be honest, we have to be fully aware of our need for him. And my prayer lately has been, Lord, get me to a place where you don't have to strip me all the way to the bare bones just so I'll need you. But if that's what it takes, keep stripping me. Because until they needed him, until they understood how empty their nets were, they were never going to follow. And so maybe today, God's stripping you. And God is saying, hey, I know your net's empty. When you go hand it to me. And you may say, my net's okay. And I said, well, maybe. Or maybe you're about to find out how empty it really is. But all I say is this. Until we understand our desperate need for him, we'll never really follow him. So the first thing that had to happen for them is they had to understand their need. The second is they had to understand who they were going to follow. See, when he filled the net, it revealed who he was. It revealed his character. But he didn't just show how powerful he was. See, understand this. He didn't just show off and go, I'm so powerful, I'll fill your pocketbook, I'll fill up your wallet, you'll never have needs. No, he said, I'll take care of your needs. I will do things you never can, but I will also love you while seeing you at your worst. I will love you when knowing that you don't deserve me. He exposed their weakness, and he still wanted them. He still chose them. And those empty nets not only revealed their need, it revealed his character. And I'm going to tell you, you won't follow him if you don't understand him, if you don't know him. And until we see him clearly, we won't respond to him correctly. And so maybe you're here today and you just need to say, God, reveal yourself to me. I need to see you for who you are. Because if you're here today and you think you understand God, you don't have a clue. He's too big for us. And it'll be our lifetime's pursuit to understand him. And praise the Lord, the minute I get in heaven, I'll understand it all. But it is our goal to keep pursuing and asking God to reveal himself. But I can tell you this. I understood God best when I've needed him most. And he loves you too much to not strip you of everything, so you'll know that. And then the third thing is the empty nets. It not only revealed their need, it revealed his character, but it revealed their purpose. See, he got those nets and he said, okay, great job. You got all that you need. Now let's leave it behind and go do something else. But see, when God shows you his need, reveals his character, you're ready for why he put you on this earth. See, if you were called to know him, to be in love with him, and that's it, you'd already be in heaven. What's the purpose of being here? He says, no. I left you so what? You can go do this for others. Look at the world around us right now. Look at the people. There are so much losses. And I'm not standing up here going, I got it right and they got it wrong. There are people doing everything they can to be happy, to be seen, to be noticed, to feel like they matter at all. And we can judge and we can say, this is crazy and that's crazy. But at the end of the day, they just want to know they matter. And what Jesus is telling the disciples is, listen, you matter because I chose you. But I chose you so you could go after others. I did not give you purpose, set you free, give you value for you to keep it to yourself. Does it break your heart that there are people every day dying apart from Jesus? We say it does, but does it? Because I know it aggravates us that people believe the things they believe. I know we get frustrated that there's sin in this world, but does it break our heart? Recently, my daughter had gotten into watching these documentaries on Drain the Ocean. And they one of them was Drain the Ocean, World War II, where they went and they looked at these boats and looked at these ships and could tell stories based on what happened. And in one of them, I just happened to walk by and it caught my attention, was this one moment where we had American soldiers on a ship with other people, with people from the UK and different places, and they're on this ship, and it's not our boat. We don't know what we're doing. We have these young boys, 20-year-old kids on this boat, and a bomb hits the boat. And it kills a few hundred men, but there are thousands still left. And the men on the boat that knew what they were doing, they jumped in the rafts and they took off. And there were others waiting going, well, will someone tell us what to do? There was even some survivors that said we kept looking at the captain going, because we were trained to never leave the boat. We were trained to never leave the ship, that we can't abandon it. And people are jumping off, and at one point they just said, well, I guess we just have to go. And it said over 500 men drowned because they didn't know what to do. And the premise was, did this need to happen? They go down, they look up, and they pull this boat up, and it's heartbreaking. Because all the rafts, they were taken. They were gone. But all around that boat were little safety boats that were strapped to the sides, that were made to hold 12 people at a time. But nobody knew how to use them. Nobody knew what to do with them. There were 40 of these boats. More than 400 of the 500 would have been saved if they had just known. And the guy talking about it, this historian, he had tears right on his face. He said, sometimes what you see when you pull these things up break your heart, because this didn't have to happen. And as I was walking by, it caught me, and I said, Lord, there are so many people every day dying and going to hell. And there's a way. This doesn't have to happen. And no, I'm not responsible for what anyone does with Jesus. But I can tell you, I'm not teaching enough people how to use the safety boat. I'm not doing everything I can to make sure people know, you don't have to drown. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to keep putting yourself in these relationships. You don't have to keep striving for all these things. You don't have to keep being so miserable. There is a way. I can tell you, I'm not that broken and that burdened by the needs. And as I read this verse this morning and read these verses this morning, I said, Lord, break my heart. Because I won't fish for men. I won't go after and catch the others, the lost, if I'm not caught by you first. If I don't know my need and understand who you are, see you clearly. So I just want to challenge you today as we bring this to an end. As you begin to pray over these areas. Because Jesus is coming back. And I don't know. People tell you all the time, it's soon, it's tomorrow. I don't have a clue. But it's happening. And if we're going to do our part, be the people he called us to be, we have to understand our need. We have to see him for who he is. And we have to know our purpose. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for who you are. Lord, expose the emptiness of my net. I'm not enough for any area of my life. I'm not enough as a dad, as a husband. And instead of just making me feel bad about it, which Satan wants, expose my need and show me that the only way I can be a good dad, I can be a good husband, I can be a good pastor, I can be all the things you call me to be, is for me to give you my net. Lord, reveal our emptiness, reveal your character, and reveal your purpose for our lives. Lord, we thank you for who you are and your wonderful name. Amen. Thank you all for being here today. We'll see you next week.